Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Learn Chess. Today, we're diving into an exciting match between Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann. Magnus has the white pieces, while Hans plays with the black. The game begins with Magnus opening with pawn to b3, and Hans responding with pawn to d5. Magnus develops his knight to f3, and Hans follows with bishop to f5. Magnus plays bishop to b2, entering the ready opening. Hans strengthens the center with pawn to e6, and Magnus prepares to fianchetto by playing pawn to g3. Hans develops his knight to f6, and Magnus completes the fianchetto with bishop to g2. Hans then plays pawn to h6, a classy move, and Magnus responds with pawn to d3. Hans prepares to castle with bishop to e7. Magnus develops his knight to d2, and both players castle kingside. The action shifts to the A file as both players make moves there, with Hans retreating his bishop. Magnus breaks the center with pawn to c4, and Hans develops his knight. White captures the pawn, and black recaptures. Both players move their rooks to the open file. Hans retreats his bishop, and Magnus places his rook on c2. Hans pulls back his knight, and Magnus places his queen on c1. Hans plays pawn to c7, Magnus captures, and Hans develops his knight to b7. Magnus shifts his queen to b5, Hans counters with rook to e6, followed by Magnus playing bishop to h3, and Hans placing his rook on b6. Magnus moves his queen to a4, Hans attacks it, and Magnus moves it to d4. Hans captures a pawn, leading to exchanges. Magnus places his knight on d2, and Hans plays rook to b5. White plays knight to f1, Hans places his queen on b6, leading to a trade. Magnus positions his bishop on d4, while Hans shifts his rook to b3. At this moment, Hans blunders with pawn to b5, trapping his rook. Magnus moves his knight to d2. Hans tries to defend, but Magnus pushes pawn to f3. Hans attempts to regroup with knight to e8, but Magnus captures the rook, and Hans takes back with the pawn. White places his rook on b1, and Hans captures another pawn. Magnus improves his king's position, and Hans develops his knight to c7. Magnus attacks the knight, and Hans plays rook to a2. Magnus centralizes his king, and Hans blunders with knight to e8. Magnus pins the knight, and despite Hans's defense, Magnus seals the game with bishop to c5, leading to a checkmate in one move. Hans resigns, and Magnus wins the match. You enjoyed this video? Don't forget to subscribe for more chess content like this.